Thank you for joining us for this Dairy Hollow Chinwag, brought to you by the Writers Colony at Dairy Hollow, a nonprofit residency program for writers of all backgrounds, genres, and levels of experience. Our private writing suites are housed in 2 adjacent historic buildings in a wooded setting within walking distance to the quaint Victorian arts village of Eureka Springs in the Arkansas Ozarks. We provide uninterrupted writing time, a European-style gourmet dinner prepared 5 nights a week and served in our community dining room, the camaraderie of other professional writers when you want it, and a community kitchen stocked with the basics for other meals. Learn more about us at writerscolony.org. I'm Michelle Hannon. I'm the Executive Director here at the Writers Colony at Dairy Hollow. And today it is my great pleasure to introduce Seif-Eldeine, winner of the 2021 Emerging Poet Fellowship for writers working on their first book of poetry. Welcome, Seif-Eldeine. Let's start out by having you tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, I think the first thing to know is I'm a huge basketball fan, which plays into my writing. I'm a Celtics fan, and they had a 9-game win streak recently, and then they just lost it last night by 1 point to the worst team in the league. So you never know how it goes. It's sort of like applying to these poetry magazines. You never know what they're going to say. I just recently had a encouraging rejection from Poetry Magazine, which was great. I've been a huge fan of their magazine for the longest time. They've been so instrumental, as I'm sure if for poets out there who are watching, it's really hard to afford these journals and afford these books when you're a poet and that's what you're trying to do. You're submitting so many places, and I've gone just about every day to the Poetry Foundation's website and looked at their writers. So it really meant a lot for me to have that encouragement. It definitely means a lot to have the support of the Writers Colony at Dairy Hollow. And I've had poems published in the Michigan Quarterly Review, the Massachusetts Review, Pedestal Magazine, Q Literary Magazine, and this great magazine out of India that's not really well known, Vaya Via, and they're very good at promoting it online, so that if you search my name, Seif-Eldeine on Google, despite the fact it's a small journal, even smaller than the other ones I mentioned, and it's coming out of India, which is obviously far. They do great stuff to promote it, so it's one of the first things that comes up. And he helped me edit some of the poems and get them to a better place. So that's a great. It's VAYAVYA. If you're looking for some place to submit, that's a great place to submit. So I have this stream of consciousness writings I do on patreon.com/Seif-Eldeine, and that's without the dash. That's SEIFELDEINE. It's sort of cutting edge surrealism. It's much different. It's a mix of politics, basketball, sports, pop culture. It's much different than I would say anything, at least I've seen out there. So that's a good place to look for my work. And all my published poems where the rights have returned back to me are on poemhunter.com, so you can get a sense of my poetry from there. Hopefully I'll have a book out soon, so that's always available to people. Once I do have a book out, that they'll be able to look and see if if they want to buy the book ahead of time. But I'm sort of getting ahead of myself.
Well,
I'm hopeful one day I'll have a book out.
I love how you're inspired by such different things, Seif-Eldeine. Tell us how being at Dairy Hollow affected your writing while in residence, and what did you bring away from your residency?
Well, I think the biggest thing was having a community of writers. I actually was reading, I was in the Langston Hughes suite, and I was reading the complete poems of Langston Hughes. And somebody had left a note next to I Too by Langston Hughes saying, "I love this poem, sign this note if you loved it too." And it had one other person's name, and I signed the name too, and that inspired me to write a poem. So it is really a great community. Having the dinners with my fellow residents was a huge inspiration to me too. And just being surrounded by books and being in a place that was secluded, but there were places to go. There was a music festival, I believe, when I was there. I didn't venture out into it, but I heard a lot of good things from people about the music festival. So Eureka Springs has 2,000.
A little over, yeah.
Yeah, 2,000. So it's a small community. You're going to be focused on your writing there. For me, a big thing that happened is I was struggling with marijuana abuse. I sort of go in and out of sobriety with marijuana, and it has a very negative effect on my life. So I was like, I'm going to go down there. I'm not going to smoke. And just being in a community and being in an area that got my mind off it was pretty incredible. I got down there February 8th or January 8th. I haven't smoked since then. So that's probably the most transformative thing that happened to me when I was down there. And just because of the area and the community and focusing on my writing and all of that really had an effect on. I wasn't even thinking about it down there, which wouldn't be the case if I was up in my home in Massachusetts. And I did after a week and a half say I was going back home to my mother, talking about going home to the writers' colony. So I called it home after like a week and a half, which was interesting and nice. I was like, okay, I guess it's
awesome
so far.
Well, I'm really excited to hear you read some of your work, Seif-Eldeine. Tell us about what you're reading for us today, and I'm going to turn the floor over to you.
Okay. So this is, I'm a Syrian American poet, and my father was born and raised in Syria, and I'm first generation. He came over, and I think it was 81 or 82, and I spent time living in Syria for about a year in total in my life, maybe a little over a year at different times. So I'm very familiar with the area. I was also over in Lebanon for 5 or 6 months. So I've been very upset about the civil war that's been going on there. So that's my first manuscript is based on the civil war in Syria, and it sort of takes on different persona narrators to go over that civil war. So I will begin reading it to you now. The sound of a forgotten letter. I look at a photograph of the city I was born in, its crowded roadways, its gray buildings, the white dome and marble floor of the Umayyad Mosque, the pointed minarets where you can hear the call to prayer, that rises from them like 99 shots from twin Glocks, and I imagine what was. The house looks tortured the houses look tortured straight into sewn by a soldier with a rock knife. Under the arch of Sukhamadia, men walk side by side with me. I smell their sweat over the merchant's cologne. If I look closely at the photograph, I will miss the black vests of the Muhabarat as they detain a university student from protesting the emergency law. Instead, I'll see a young man who travels from the mountain down the steep avenue and into the city, standing on his bicycle's handlebars. I won't see the Free Syrian Army soldier shot by an 18-year-old studying to be an architect because he wants to design the buildings that will replace the rubble. Maybe I'll see another boy thinking about a girl reading Nizar Kabani until jasmine springs from his hands and blossoms over the flowers on the girl's balcony, her tete planted before the desert knew the sound of death. Hold on a second, I lost it. I hold the photograph up to my eyes, and instead of an ISIS soldier hearing the casing of his bullet as it hits the blood-soaked streets of Damascus, I'm a man who plays the oud with my wrist so close to the fretboard I can hear it whisper. The thick palms of Derbeke players' hands turn red from the cowhide. The belly dancer's abs quiver. She rolls her vertebrae, leaning back her head until the band on her hair falls loose. But mostly I feel like the child who sleeps on the carpets of the mosque. Its arabesque contains all the shapes of the world that cannot fit a photograph. The child tries to determine if he can eat a square or a triangle or a hexagon until the janitor comes to teach him more surahs from the Quran. The sheikh, busy writing his Qibla, which says Islam is a religion of peace, no matter what the terrorists might do. And the janitor sits down with the child and pushes the air around the letter Qaf. He teaches me this letter's the letter the Syrians knew in a time before the war, that it comes from deep in the throat and you need to drop your chin and let your whole mouth say it. The most beautiful letter, as it's the hardest to say, while the letter we replaced it with comes easier, but at a much greater cost. Inside a Syrian mosque. My grandmother sits on a plastic chair that lowers with her weight. A new Quran lies between her atrophying thighs. The men kiss each other on each cheek, protests softer than surahs. During the Friday prayer, which is now a funeral, the imam avoid politics. My grandmother leaves early to dodge the crowd of mourners and the army that will shoot them. The children of our ward. The children have never read the words Dulce et Decorum Est or seen the dove or swam so far out that the jellyfish could sing them. They have enough energy to chase the pigeons, but not enough bread to feed them. They'd rather use spray paint on the stony walls of our wad's narrow corridors than to earn some lira painting the signs of tankers. In the streets, they run and shout, a jump rope, a soccer ball, 2 empty nut cans, the Mediterranean, clothes dripping with sea. They know how to move their feet. They know how to dive. They know how to rinse their hands of paint. And they know if the water gets too deep, to let air into lungs to float. Nobody wants to listen to the president. Inside the cafe, Ahmed smokes El Humra under a sign that says no smoking. Iyad blows the dice before he rolls them. Bashir stands over him and moves the checkers. The president is on TV. Rashid clicks his teeth as he sucks the dense grain from a cup of coffee. His teeth, brown and cracked, whistle between their cavities. Just back from Mecca, Haji abstains from caffeine and nicotine, drinking mango juice and searching the paper for soccer scores. Nabil pours cream into his coffee, the liquid rising above the brim, leaking onto the table. Purple lipstick sticks to Marian's teeth. She skips table to table to watch the backgammon. She wants to learn the Turkish name for the rolls. A soldier takes his cloth and dusts the desert off his cartridge. The president denounces the terrorists. The soldier looks up at Miriam, imagining her hair runs down her back when she takes off her hijab. King or queen for a day. My daughter Fatima prefers our homely throne to anything else. Simple wood, a white cotton cover, and no armrest. She's made a scepter from our toilet paper tubes. My other, Nina, cries for meat when she is not the queen. On days I am king, I give up my lamb to my children. Their stomachs are as empty as a gun that has run out of clips. The rain that comes in from our roof tastes like a first kiss. Outside, children play in a bomb crater filled with water. They smile, and for a moment the war disappears and the water cools their hate. Nina's queen today. For the first time, she decides to share her food. She makes me her court jester, so I dance and trip and fall to make the children laugh. My wife in the kitchen turns sour tomatoes into a paste. Sick of its taste, my son Mo refuses to eat. He'd rather go hungry. I hunger for my wife, but my kids in the small apartment don't allow it. Across the room, I look at her. She doesn't return my gaze, as if all these days she's had what she's had to say. From how many mountains has the moon beckoned? Last night, the moon seemed to say something, like an echo in Jayeta Grotto, the stalactites glistening like diamonds and the war many mountains away. Last night, something the moon seemed to say, a tale they still tell of Ali Baba's 40 thieves in the diamond-encrusted cave of the grotto. The thieves failed to steal the diamonds. Last night, the moon seemingly spoke our fears, 400,000 dead in Syria to the grotto's east, how they did not find the light blue waters worth more than diamonds to a thirsty man. That dark night, the moon said something, and I could not look up at it in pity or fear. I wish my people could drink from the grotto. Time to leave a jasmine to be watered by their tears. Prayers for the eggs that have yet to hatch. To calm her, my father tells my daughter the dead people in Syria were mean. Still, my children pray for them. We pray a lot. My daughter prays for the pet pigeon she left behind and the eggs that had yet to hatch. I cannot bring my daughter to Friday prayers. She makes noises and distracts her grandmother from the imam. My father meddles with this decision. She must learn, he says. She must gain faith in these terrible times. Our German neighbors complain about the call to prayer. The muezzin cries 5 times a day. They hate Fajr especially, the prayer at dawn. My wife has withdrawn. She locks herself up in our bedroom, peeks out the window and sees a tank crossing the street or a 1-year-old's eye hanging from its socket, or she hears explosions coming from everywhere. My father paces the apartment. He wants to go back. This is the time for the brotherhood. This is the time for revolution. The Syria he wants never existed and never will. My wife takes me by my hand. Habibi, she says, have we left? A confession priest won't verbalize. Ramadan heats the sweaty boots of soldier, thrusts and pierces the skin like a sword. Sweat in a take is a confession to priest, another life taken. Sweat bites the body, beautiful in its scars, and the broad shoulders of the Kurdish woman have joined this fight. Instead of feeding babies, their bosoms are for resting guns on. RPGs rid the castle of vermin. Is it a sin to kill during war? It may not be a sin, but it haunts gaunt bodies of the soldier. So much blood and crud under fingernails they can never dig out. Come be a good mother again, the message read. According to her husband, Aya forgot what it was like to be Syrian. Her tabbouleh no longer tasted the same. She prayed less and her accent was disappearing. So he took their 2-year-old son, who'd been born in Germany. She swears when he was born he had blue eyes. Retrace your steps, her husband wrote. Come back. By the time she'd called the police, her son was back in Idlib province, the last territory the jihadists controlled. Again and again, Aya folds his clothes and puts them to her nose to smell the scent. No photo of him exists. Aya's husband used to take her in his arm, stroke her wrists, and say, "This is the most tender part of the arm, and I'll hold you there." In Britain, President Bashar al-Assad was a dentist, then came to take over for his father. Many saw a reformer with the Western education and Western wife. Then came the emergency law. He took out his sickle probe and looked for cavity and found more cavities each day, drilling them and filling them with a new Syria. Haven't you always been scared of going to the dentist? What prayer rugs collect? Take comfort in the prayer lug. She is a Kevlar vest. She is a silence in the night between bombs. The zephyr comes from the mountaintop. Your God revealed the commandments. She knew your ancestors when steel made swords. Roll her with your hands, with 5 prayers turned on the tip of her tongue. For you tuck her in a safe place. For her prayers turn the world on its axis. In the street she shall hear the dying rumors of men. Do you keep forgetting your refuge? Then tie her threads like a tequila to place on your head. When your mouth dries with dirges in graveyards you cannot visit, know the dead will sing their prayers for you. Then you can bow your head and place it on your prayer rug. Then you can collect the dust and dead skin of those who came before you.
Thank you, Seif-Eldeine. Thank you for sharing your insightful poetry with us today. Such incredible imagery.
Thank you.
It was really an honor and a privilege.
Thank you.
And thank you to author Linda Level and her husband Brooks Garner for generously sponsoring the Emerging Poet Fellowship. Learn more about sponsoring a writer's colony at Dairy Hollow Fellowship for the genre or area of interest that you're passionate about at writerscolony.org. And see our open and pending fellowship opportunities at writerscolony.org/fellowships. Thanks again.